So, welcome here to the last keynote session that is today. You know the Congress themes by now. It's circling around the Sustainable Development Goals, and there are 6 sub-themes. And you also know that it's this overall headline, Leave No One Behind, and that is why it makes a lot of sense that one of the 6 sub-themes will be on health. And that is what we're going to discuss now. First, we'll hear from Christian Benimana, co-executive director and senior principal of Mass Design Group based in Kigali, Rwanda. His work is driven by the belief that building for health is not just about building design that is done well. No, it's also, in order to do it right, it's also important that it can contribute to empowerment. And those of you who listened in on the previous session here would know that the 2 young activists, they also very much emphasized this question on empowerment. Christian Benimana is also the founding director of the African Design Center. And Christian Benimana, it's a pleasure now to give the floor to you. Please.
Thank you. Lots of enthusiasm. Thanks for that. All right, so the most recent outbreak of COVID-19 did show clearly that our built environment is, at best, not designed to protect our health when it's put under the pressures of a highly contagious disease, and therefore a pandemic. And at worst, that same built environment actually actively contributes to us being in harm's way. The fact is that buildings can heal. There's no fact about that. I think we've made, and other people, enough arguments about that. So what I hope I can make as an argument today is not whether they do or not, or how, but by how much they can if we architects apply a little bit more intentionality about this. I want to go to a quote by a gentleman called Brian Stevenson. He's the founder of the Eco Justice Initiative. It's an organization based in the United States that is committed to ending mass incarceration, challenging racial and economic injustice, and to protect the basic human rights for the most vulnerable in the United States. Brian famously said that the question about the capital punishment in the United States is not whether people who commit serious offenses like rape and murder deserve to die, but it's whether we deserve to kill. And in thinking about that conversation today, of what I should talk about today, I want us architects to also question whether we deserve or we're deserving to produce architecture not for health. And if that's the case, then would we say that the current architecture stock on the market is all designed for health? And if it's not, then why? Is that a question? So I work at Mass Design Group, and I'm in our Kigali office in Rwanda. We have 2 offices in Africa, we have 4 offices and 3 in the United States. And for us, this question comes down to question how we practice. We want to see if this model, the one above, of procuring of architecture services, in which the conversations with decision-making between the clients, who we call our clients, and we architects being separated between different phases of life cycles of the project, is equipped to help us deliver on this promise of architecture of health. And we want to see if there's a model, the one at the bottom, that can allow us to be part and piece parcel of each conversations on the entire life cycle of the project and be able to deliver this architecture of health. Health for us is free of hopelessness. We've come to learn that design is never neutral. And we've set out to engage in architecture and design processes that promote health, justice, and human dignity. For many learners in sub-Saharan Africa, the prospect of further education after high school is close to non-existent. To quote Fred Swaneker, the founder of Africa Leadership University, India currently is at 18% of enrollment of all people in the age of going to university. Africa, sub-Saharan Africa specifically, to reach India's level of enrollment, we'll have to build 135 universities of the scales of Harvard each year for the next 15 years. So with this projected growth, where we perceive 50% of the population of Africa being under 25 years old by 2050, this makes the continent the fastest growing continent that faces many grand challenges. I'm not going to repeat all these challenges. But Fred Swaneker's vision is for this Africa Leadership University graduates is to become problem solvers who solves these challenges in innovative ways. As such, the students at ALU, Africa Leadership University, are asked to declare a mission, not to choose a major, as it's conventionally understood. That's the project we designed in partnership with Africa Leadership University founder, Fred Swaneker. The pedagogy was developed as an innovative learning model that provides affordable access to higher education across the continent based on 4 phases of self-directed learning around issues of interests. And that's discovery, individual learning, peer groups, and facilitated learning. Circular pods were assigned to the grid and distributed across the campus within adjacent to larger work hives and common areas. Students and faculty are able to peel off to focus to smaller pods individually or meet in larger pods for group work or experience sharing. The gridded modules between the pods support up to 30 students for facilitated learning, and for larger classes, gatherings, or lectures, the modules are connected into larger spaces and shared commons. The modular design reflects ALU's unique learning cycle, with spaces dedicated to self-peer and facilitated learning, and an interconnected campus to support discovery. To accommodate the use of ALU's 10 hectares site that has a 40-meter elevation difference, the building is terraced over 6 levels. The floor of one plaza becomes the roof of the space below. This design pursues spatial efficiency by weaving interior and exterior spaces such as courtyards and terraces, which takes advantage of Kigali's year-round wonderful temperate climate. And due to this elevation complexity, there isn't a single floor plan that can fully represent this project. The project uses these modules stacked and linked together to create different spaces of learning and interaction. The ALU building is a concrete frame filled with compressed stabilized earth blocks, fabricated on-site with a light-colored clay brick facade. This facade, the bricks that makes this facade came from a town that is only 1.5 kilometers outside of the city, Kigali city. And the bricks are design-inspired, they're energy efficient, low maintenance, and relatively weatherproof. For us, health is social, and therefore needs to be social epidemics free. There is an estimated 700 gun violence victims each week in the United States, documented. For us, this is a national epidemic that touches every community in the US, and the sheer scale of this epidemic often reduces victims of gun violence to just statistics. And ideas of change keeps remaining just empty promises. So we've worked on this project, the Gun Violence Memorial, that seeks to preserve individual memories and communicate the magnitude of the gun violence epidemic in built space, hoping to foster a national healing process that begins with a recognition of our collective loss and its impact on our society. The memorial design features 4 houses, the initial project, built of 700 bricks, and each house representing the average number of lives taken due to gun violence each week in the US. It's sad to say that this project, we conceived it back in the days in 2019, and at the moment, I think these houses will be much more tragically. Families who have been impacted by this gun violence have contributed remembrance objects at in-person collection events in 14 cities at a time. We've added more cities, and we'll continue collecting these objects. The remembrance objects are placed within a glass brick, displaying the name, year of birth, and year of death of the person being honored. And inside each house, visitors can hear audio recordings from interviews conducted together with our team and an organization called StoryCorps. Our vision and hopes, and the organizations we work with, is that this will become a permanent memorial, national memorial, to honor the lives and narratives of the victims of gun violence. So architecture has a place to play in eradicating social epidemics, not just gun violence in the United States, but in all communities we have others. Drug abuse, prostitution, human trafficking, etc. We should engage all this. For us, health is trauma-free and should be trauma-free. The United States has done very little to recognize the lasting societal damage perpetuated by its long history of slavery. In working on the National Memorial to Peace and Justice in Montgomery, Alabama, this became the first national memorial to victims of the lynching in the American South. The structure suspends 800 Colton steel monuments to represent the counties in the United States where racial terror lynching took place, each documented, and each monument is engraved with the names of the documented victims. The visitors at each stage of the arc of transformation have a different relationship to these monuments. Start from where you can identify them to be the scale of a person, so you can relate to it. Then you go to a place where you start enduring discomfort, where they start rising above you, evoking the construct in which that person is hung above you, because that was the preferred method of lynching. Then you go to a place where you have to be proximate with the idea of the sheer size of this tragedy, and then you start engaging with narratives that changes what we've learned or have not learned about this process, and then you emerge from there to stand above all of this to evoke a sense of remaining hopeful. This work for us recognizes the need for a memorial space that embraces this truth and inspires reflection and change. Duplicates of each of the monuments lie in the memory bank outside of the primary structure. The corresponding counties documented here were invited to engage in this process and to claim their marker and acknowledgement and reconciliation, and placing it, hopefully, that marker in their own community. It is EJI's hope, and ours too, that the National Memorial to Peace and Justice inspires communities across the US to enter a truth-telling about racial injustice in their own local histories as part of a larger movement to create an era of restorative truth-telling and justice that changes consciousness in that country. Buildings and the construction industry accounts for almost 40% of global gas emissions. With agriculture linked to an additional 10%, the resulting climate crisis has reduced biodiversity and diminished the land productivity of farmlands, further amplified by growing population and architectural developments. But we still need the ability to have access to clean air, still live and still thrive in our communities. Like many countries in the global south, Rwanda, my country where I come from, is transforming rapidly. In the last 50 years, our population has more than tripled. Land use has shifted from more than 3/4 wilderness to now more than 3/4 agriculture production, contributing to deforestation, overgrazing, soil degradation, and loss of habitat and biodiversity. About 80% of Rwanda households rely on farming for at least part of our lives, but a fifth remain food insecure. So developing a future of sustainable food is inherently about figuring out how to address the threats of climate change and biodiversity loss. This project, the Rwanda Institute for Conservation Agriculture, hopes to empower the next generation of leaders in food production, providing world-class education, conservation, agriculture, principles and practical skills in communication, leadership, and entrepreneurship. Agriculture has historically not been the most desirable concentration for students finishing high school. And we hope RICA can change that perspective. So 2 complementary concepts informed the curriculum of the design. One Health, which is gaining increasing recognition globally, holds that human, animal, and ecological health are inextricably intertwined. Conservation agriculture, meanwhile, in contrast to the short-sighted practices of industrial farming, has proven so damaging. Conservation agriculture, on the other hand, centers on the importance of soil conservation and regeneration, actively rebuilding biodiversity and natural processes above and below the surface of the ground. RICA will be the first climate-positive campus of its kind. Our efforts in design blur the lines between environmentalist, engineer, horticulture, designer, architect, educator, and contractor to really try to construct a unique agriculture model. Why did we invest in focusing on embodied carbon? Because in addition of buildings contributing 40% of total carbon emissions, buildings are also responsible for 55% of the world's electricity usage and 5% of water usage, as well as 50% of raw and value-added materials together that we produce. So with rapid urban growth on the African continent, as just meant, we seek to create scientifically, research not just for carbon neutrality in construction, but try to reach climate positivity. The project developed a supply chain of building materials, harvested, crafted, and sourced locally, with 90% of the budget of this project, of the entire $75 million of this project, spent within 1,000 kilometers of the site, and 96% of materials sourced within the country of Rwanda. Structural foundations employs locally quarried stones to drastically reduce concrete volumes. Our engineers researched and tested on-site soils to create low cement mix for the site-made compressed, stabilized earth blocks and rammed earth walling, roof structures that uses regionally sourced softwoods to catalyze a fledgling low-carbon industry. The project had fostered local markets for terracotta and timber, for example. It has modeled new methods of working with regionally appropriate materials, methods that are now informing the development of new trade standards and practices. RICA exterior patios uses locally fabricated tiles, which the project engineers in-house have used to create Rwanda's probably first environmental product declarations for other local products as well. About 85% local artisans and cooperatives fabricated furniture we designed in-house and some of the fittings, and we created around 9,000 objects in all, which, by contrast, we could have gone to China or to Dubai to find very easy materials. So by considering all stages of the building process, material extraction, manufacturing, transportation, and installation, am I done? This is the last slide. This campus will be 45% less than global average for institutional works. And Rika campus is predicted to be climate positive by 2044, removing more carbon from that point forward than was produced from the campus creation and ongoing operations. I'll stop there. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Christian Benimana, for a very thoughtful presentation, and also reminding us that when we speak about health, it's not just about health for people, it relates very much also to health for planet. And then I think you had this very good one-liner: architecture is never neutral. It heals or it hurts. So there is a choice there. And then we had this very telling graph on Rwanda and the land use, 1990 and 2017. I think it shows some of the challenges we have. Thank you very much to you. Now it is my pleasure to welcome on stage Maria Neira, Director of the World Health Organization's Department of Environment, Climate Change and Health, which, among many other things, oversees progress in the sector towards the SDGs. And for good reasons, because I understand that from 2030 to 2050, according to the WHO, climate change is expected to cause approximately 250,000 additional deaths per year. 250,000 additional deaths per year. In other words, there is a risk that if we are not smarter in whatever we do, then we will eat up a lot of other progress that we made. Maria Neira, we are looking forward very much to your presentation. You have the floor.
Thank you very much. And a pleasure to be with all of you. I feel a little bit exotic. I think I'm the only medical doctor. Please don't get sick. I can still do something, but I'm not a clinician anymore. But I feel exotic because you are all architects, and I'm here representing the public health community together with you. So maybe the only thing that gives me some credentials is the fact that this morning was discussed that the fact that a politician get married to an architect, that might help. And I'm married to an architect, so maybe this gives me some good credentials and make me maybe a medium politician. Let me tell you about our world as public health officers, as medical world. Let me tell you, you work with materials, you work with new technologies, you think on buildings, you think on cities, you think on creation. This is your world. Our world is smaller. It's about particles, it's about bacteria, it's about virus, it's about what makes people healthy, and particularly as well how to prevent and avoid people to be exposed to things that will make them sick. Just a small reminder that health doesn't start at the hospital, at the contrary. Health, when you go to the hospital, is because you lost your health. So what we need to do is starting health wherever health can be influenced or negotiated or promoted. And you are one of the critical sectors where we think that we can influence, promote health. So once I got you to my wall, our wall on small particles, let me tell you what do we need as a public health community from all of you, and how much we count on you for what we have in front of us. Yes, we have an expected 250,000 additional deaths caused by, and this is a very conservative figure, by the way, caused by the causes of climate change. But let me give you another figure, which is much worse than that. We have every year 7 million premature deaths, 7 million, the population of Paris, Rome, and Madrid together. Imagine those three big cities, the population of these three big cities disappearing every year. And this is caused by exposure to the bad quality of the air we breathe. So we need your help. How can it be possible that we live in places where, and I say places, not just cities, in places where the quality of the air we breathe is so bad that not only cause chronic diseases, but in addition to that will cause the premature death of 7 million people every year. And I know that this figure is shocking, but probably not shocking enough, because it's not taking the headlines of the newspaper every day, and it should be. I mean, I don't see any other, apart from the tobacco, but at the end of the day, tobacco, with all the considerations and all of that, we have done something very strong, and still we have 8 million deaths every year. But on air pollution, this is something that will depend on many other factors, and not just the desire or not of me to smoke. And therefore, we need to put all of those sources of pollution together, understand that, and reduce it. What we need is your help on reducing this pollution and the different sources. One of them is definitely construction. So we need your help on how we can reduce emissions from construction. The other important source is clearly transport, mobility, and the other one will be our building environment, our built environment. So obviously, we need to work together. We need to work together to reduce the bad quality of the air we breathe, and we need to work together to make sure that those healthy planning that you will be doing, healthy urban planning that we can do together will produce a lot of benefits for our health. Another thing we need in our cities and our spaces and the places where people live is that they could interact. It looks something very superficial, but if you don't interact, you don't have a good mental health. And people is losing their mental health because our environments, particularly the urban spaces, are not very friendly for people to interact, and this is generating a lot of isolation and lack of social interaction that is contributing to a problem of mental health. So you see already two big problems: air pollution affecting our health, mental health. The third one, I'm sure that you all heard about chronic diseases, non-communicable diseases. You all heard about cancer, hypertension, diabetes. All of those diseases are now #1 in our list of priorities, and all of those diseases are conditioned to two factors fundamentally, well, 5, but if you cannot have an active lifestyle, means if you cannot walk, obviously you have a sedentary lifestyle that will be contributing to many of those chronic non-communicable diseases. So again, another request for you. We need places where people live where we will be able to walk or cycle, or at least be having a minimum of active lifestyle. And of course, we need as well access to healthy food. We need to be able to have a less sedentary lifestyle. We need to have fresh fruits, fresh vegetables, fresh and not only processed food in the places where we live. So we need you to incorporate all of those elements as well to reduce this epidemic of non-communicable diseases. We need, of course, buildings that will be more cost efficient and energy efficient, because the sources of energy that we are using now, the combustion of fossil fuels, are literally killing us. So, small request for all of you. Please make our people a little bit more healthy, but at least as well a little bit more happy. I know that Leonardo da Vinci is one of, I suppose, one of your inspirations, but Leonardo da Vinci, remember that he was saying that, or maybe not, but you know those quotes that circulate, who knows if it's true or not. He says that people need to live in cities not only to be healthy, but to be happy. So that will be the dream of an architect, I'm sure, and that will be the dream of a public health officer. We want to reduce the amount of work of our hospitals. When you reach the hospitals, it's because on all of those social and environmental determinants of health, we fail somewhere. So I told you what is our role, what we need as the public health community. And now let me put an argument here about maybe a little bit pretentious. Some prescriptions. You know, doctors, you know, we do a diagnosis, but then, of course, we don't stay on the diagnosis. We present some prescriptions, some recommendations, some therapeutic protocol. So allow me to be a little bit pretentious here, giving you some prescriptions, and I hope you will check all of them and do it. First, as an architect working, no matter where you work, please have on your desk the capacity to monitor the quality of the air on your city, on your wherever you live, wherever you work. Please check every day the quality of the air that your citizens are breathing, because you have a role there. Once you do that, another prescription, please, from time to time, talk to the health community. I know that they can be very reluctant sometimes. They might not understand why they need to work with you, but this is what we call for many years health in all policies, you know. We need to be able to work with different communities who have the capacity to influence, and your capacity to influence is enormous, is enormous. We need as well cities where, in case of heat waves, which are happening, as you know, very often now, where is these people going to study or to get some refuge or to get some fresh air? You need to use your fantastic creativity and technologies and capacities and your network to make sure that our cities will have more green spaces, will have a shadow for those citizens who are now confronted to these temperatures. Last year in London, I remember in July, they reached 40, and you can say, well, what is 40? You know, it's nothing. In Sevilla, they reached that, and in Africa, almost every day. But for London, it was a chaos. They didn't know what to do. They are not prepared for that, and more we are having cities, spaces, urban environments where people need to have an option to study, work on different conditions, on different climatic conditions that will protect them, particularly during the heat waves that, as you know, they are increasing now in intensity and seriousness of the problem. So we need you on that front as well. Another prescription, please, if you know a pediatrician in your city or an internal medicine doctor or the director of a hospital, talk to them. Try to create this dialogue with the two communities, because more and more we need to work together. This is not just about the planet. Climate change, the narrative until now has been very much about what is happening to the planet, what is going to happen to the glaciers, what is going to happen to the polar bears. Trust me, this is about our lungs as well. Your lungs, my lungs, the pink history around our lungs. Our lungs used to be lovely pink color. They are not anymore. And we have discovered more and more patients 17 years old with lungs that looks the lungs of a chronic smoker for many, many years. So no more pink lungs for most of us living in different places. Health, just a few words about money, cost. 5.2 trillion every year, $5.2 trillion every year going to fossil fuel subsidies. And then people still use the argument that taking care of our health is very expensive. We are already paying the cost of not doing transformations on climate change. Our hospitals are already paying the price because $77 billion are going every year to cope and treat those patients and those diseases caused by the consequences of combustion of oil and gas. So we need you on this critical reduction of emissions. Another point, almost there, we need to decarbonize our health systems. We are now working very much on an initiative called ATTACH, which is a transformative alliance to look at how we can reduce the carbon footprint of the health system. You know that globally the health system is contributing to 5% of the global emissions. 5% is not a small number. Our hospitals, of course, are very much demanding of energy, so we need to decarbonize the health system. We are in the good path for that. It's generating a lot of motivation and no controversy. At the contrary, people is using the health argument as the one that can maybe put some motivation to accelerate the response that we need to give to the climate change and the pollution crisis that we are facing. We will be going to COP28 this year for the first time. We are having a health day, and we will be using this health argument to push for more action, and we need you with the good experiences, the good examples, what you are doing, all the initiatives you are putting in place. We need to display all of those things that are already happening, the good things that you are doing, how you are creating an architecture that is not only pleasant to our view and not only fantastic from an aesthetical point of view, but as well contributing to the needs of our citizens in terms of protecting and promoting their health. And my last point is, believe it or not, you are not only architects, you are ministers of health. Yes, you are ministers of health, and we need you as ministers of health. Anytime you plan something from an architectural point of view, please think about the health of the people, the impact that this will have on the health of the people. We know that this collaboration will be fantastic, and I am very trustful that it will be the case. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Maria Neira, please. And there, I don't know if it was a promotion or what, that you're now all ministers of health, but I think the message was very, very clear. Thank you very much, both of you. Maria, I just thought you have also experienced this over a number of years. And then the whole world thinks, now we are moving, and the SDGs, and now. And then comes COVID, and the attention is somewhere else. Then we are out of that. Then comes inflation. Then comes the food crisis. How can we stay tuned on also the health aspects here, not just in this place or that building, but broadly speaking? What is your thinking around these things?
I think the answer is common sense. I mean, if you look at the health benefits that we can obtain from 3 transitions that we need to do, the transition to clean, renewable sources of energy, the transition to sustainable food systems, and the transition to a healthy urban or territory planning, those 3 are common sense. They will generate benefits for the health of the people.
Also economically,
for climate change, economic, green jobs. I mean, name it. But and people tell us that this is feasible. I think we heard it this morning as well by Ingells. This is feasible. And there are other solutions on the way you go for the built environment that I heard today. I have the opportunity to discuss with others. So I think it's just decided to change the inertia that is taking us to go one crisis after another without having a holistic. You know, the doctors, we used to have a holistic approach to the body of the people, because otherwise you will fix one problem, but you will disadjust others. So I think it's just a common sense. Change the sources of energy and start to plan differently, and we have plenty of solutions that we can apply.
But I wonder, Kristen Benimana, that it's common sense, as Maria Neira says, and yet I can only imagine that if I were, say, a city planner or an architect in, for instance, Kigali, there would be so many things I would have to do at the same time and think of and incorporate, and maybe not always the regulatory framework is sort of accommodating all the things I need. Is people ready there? Are the skills there to maneuver in this complexity that we are discussing here?
Yes, and no at the same time. Yes, why? Because to her point that she just made right now, it makes common sense. Then why doesn't it get done if it makes common sense? After working in this field for 13 years, I've realized two things for that reason. One is that there are forces, market forces, and processes we've created, we've been accustomed to, that we know how to do them, that we are not willing to let go, that are in the way of making that transition happen or happen fast enough. And I pointed out one of them, which is a pet peeve of me. This procurement process of almost anything that was invented for efficiency in resources using has become, at least for me, one of the reasons why this is not done or not done fast enough. The second reason for it is that the systems of operations in which these changes or transformations can happen are foreign to many communities. They're set up in offices in Europe, United States, and people in the global south don't know what to do with them. And usually what ends up happening is that the people that are decision makers, these things are foreign to them. They don't understand them. They cannot translate them into their surroundings. They're not able to integrate them.
So what do we do with that problem?
I think what we do with that problem is to change our ways of doing things. Because, and I make this argument, if something needs to be decarbonized, then should it exist in the first place? So I think we need to reset the tone and say, like, what are the objectives? What are the, she said it very, like, eloquently. The objective is health. We start from there, we work backwards. But we always start from efficiency in terms of resources use, which is money, and time. Or we have a budget, we have a time we need to execute, and that is the only priority that people have in implementing things. Very few of us start from the intended outcomes and say, what is the objective? Then we work backwards, we determine the amount of timeline it's going to take and the right budget to do it. We all start from a budget and a timeline, and we architects, we asked to figure out what we can reasonably do within those constraints. And that process is flawed.
So on the demand side, there should be some other parameters that were in demand. I guess you can recognize that, Maria, that money and time, yes, that's important, but that is not all of it. How to change it?
I think we need to, you mentioned it indirectly, we need to change the narrative as well. I think first, there are several mistakes around the communication on climate change that were made. One is that probably it got very polarized. If you are environmentally friendly, you are from the left wing, and you are not. And that is creating as a kind of absurd situation. I mean, this is about the whole society. We all need to move into changing the way we produce, we consume. I mean, we need to be more sustainable for health, for the economy, for stopping the destruction. So changing that narrative, changing the way we communicate people. And that's why I think our lungs, our health can be one of those strong arguments that might take the people again to the center of the problem. If we want to reduce emissions, it's not because we are Greenpeace or we are just the people who doesn't believe on development and we don't want our country to advance economically. If we want to reduce emissions, it's because emissions are killing us, are destroying our health, destroying our society, are making financial benefits only for a very, very small group of people. And maybe we need to tell this in a very simplistic way. I think governments now, with what's happening in Ukraine, the aggression in Ukraine, they are accelerating this energy transition for obvious reasons. But I think we need to take advantage of that and really scale up at the level of ambition that the problem we are facing requires. If we talk about pollution, people might understand a little bit better than climate change. Because pollution, they feel it, you can swallow pollution, you feel it on your eyes when you go to one of those cities that are constructing buildings everywhere, and then you feel the metallic taste in your mouth because the quality of the air is so bad. So maybe we need to talk climate change and pollution and present it how much this is affecting agriculture, health, the quality of... we are eating food with microplastics. Those microplastics, we found now microplastics in the umbilical cord. So in our blood. It's something that our society enjoy, having microplastic in our body, because we are eating fish that is full of plastic. So somehow these absurd situations that we are living now, they need to be presented to our population in a way that the grandmother will be extremely motivated to do something and not thinking that this is just for the new generations which are green.
So I hear from both of you, there is this need for a more holistic narrative, a changed narrative. But do I also hear that maybe also a different role for those setting up the regulations and the standards and all this? Because for the individual architect with a project or the individual investor, it's really nice to hear about all those co-benefits. But these more long-term co-benefits will not always be what matters the most unless it's already built into the policy making. Is that one of the weaknesses we have?
Absolutely. I think legislation is another very critical piece of the puzzle. I remember, 10 years ago, we were not recycling the way we are recycling now. And this was because it was a very serious legislation in many countries. Unfortunately, only in medium and high-income countries. In many others, they are still incinerating waste, which contribute to air pollution in an incredible way. So legislation, definitely. Taxes is another one. Already, if we started to stop giving subsidies to fossil fuels. That will be an incredible benefit for our health. We are investing twice the money that we are giving to subsidies on renewables, for instance. And for us, for the health community, this is a question of life and death. Seriously, I mean, 7 million deaths is something very serious, plus the chronic diseases that is generating, plus the cost that is required for our societies and our hospitals, our health system. So definitely legislation is another one. Third, we have people developing innovation initiatives. They have passion, they are working. So the movement is now unstoppable. I think there is something that the question is the speed. We cannot allow ourselves to go at the same speed that we have been doing until now. Now, the speed has to be very, very much accelerated, otherwise this will be really very bad.
Christian, Benimana, we also talk about social inclusion, and now tax price externalities is one of the tools, but how to align that with the social dimension of this, and sometimes also in some countries, for instance in your own, where you have more and more people with more and more needs, and action has to be really, really swift and fast in order to avoid political polarization.
Yes, I think that's a good point. I need to start from making the next point I was going to make, and I hope everybody here can understand that I'm coming from a place of care and love when I take this radical position. I want to react on a point you say that we need to change narratives. I actually don't think that's enough. I don't think changing the narrative is going to get us far. I think we need to have an honest conversation. And that honest conversation is that, according to me, climate change is not the most pressing issues of our lifetime right now. That's number one. Number two, climate change is not about science and plastic particles in babies. It's not about degrees of increase. It's not about amount of gas that comes into our eyes and air that we clean. The first point is not about the most pressing issues of our lifetimes. Many communities in this world have lived with effects of climate change for years, for decades, have felt the consequences, have suffered losses of human life, capital, culture to the effect of climate change. So it's not a new problem. It's a new problem to the few privileged that have never experienced it, but have benefited from the processes of production and means of production that have led to the situation we're in. That's number one. I think we need to be very clear about that point. The second point that I just mentioned is that the same communities that have lost culture and human life and capital and their livelihoods to this problem are still in a situation where they aspire. So the way as a global community we've structured aspiration for prosperity is for a lifestyle that cannot be attained without breaking everything. It's not possible. A young person being born in Kigali right now at age of, 5 or 6 when they start using these gadgets, they start aspiring to a life they see in here. And when they're 18, they aspire to be a billionaire and have a yacht and a private jet and fly everywhere. That is the aspiration we've created. So while I understand, when we talk about solutions of let's decarbonize, let's stop subsidizing fossil fuels and everything else, those are interventions that do not, unfortunately, remove what the aspirations is. As a global community, we don't agree on what the aspirations are. And because certain communities are not ready to let go of a lifestyle that is fueled by enormous consumptions of energy for reasons that you can't explain, the need for fossil fuel is there. And the forces, the market forces, natural market forces that forces that situation to be there becomes incredibly hard to change. So while I understand that we architects and designers and innovators, entrepreneurs, we can engage in the process of creation and find innovative solutions, I must insist that we must have a global, honest conversation about what problem are we trying to solve. And that problem, as far as I'm concerned, is a problem of inequity and injustice. If we don't fix that, nothing is going to be fixed, I'm sorry to say.
Very strong message.
I cannot agree more with you, and I think the COP28 is, every COP is the place where this type of what you call honest dialogue, and even maybe more proactive and strong dialogue from the Global South. I think you have to be very clear on this issue of lack of justice, inequity, and solving the problem not with charity, but with real solutions and hearing the voice of the Global South in the very, very correct way. Let me just be a little bit more provocative on another thing. I agree with you regarding the aspirations. I totally agree, and more than that, on the lack of justice on the transition. But if we are saying that in our health systems we need to decarbonize on the medium and high income countries. Of course, the low income countries, they don't need to decarbonize because they are not contributing.
Correct.
What they need is to gain access to electricity, but you can gain access to electricity with solar panels. Somebody had to explain me why we don't have every single healthcare facility in Africa with a solar panel in the roof. So, solar energy is available. The technology is now cheaper. The resources to maybe get in that is there. So we need to make access to these healthcare demanders of access to clean sources of electricity. They don't need to go through first the bad sources of energy and then go to the clean. They can directly, and that will be my dream now. I would like to see every single healthcare facility in Africa with a solar panel on the roof, and that it can be part of the dialogue in COP28.
We designed a number of hospitals, and I'm going to explain exactly to you what the problem we run into when we try to do that. Just give me 1 minute. So it starts with the ambition. We want to have clean energy. And then we go to the demand side of it. You have all these expensive electric equipments that are so sensitive and require like so much power consumption that the system you need to procure of clean energy to supply that is unattainable because there's no budget. It's a hospital in Africa. And then you go into the legal issues where like every $2 million equipment that comes says, if our equipment is destroyed because of a power surge or change of this tiny variation, like all our warranties are null and void. And therefore the Ministry of Health is like, I don't want any problem, I want a substation, and I want a stabilizer, UPS, or whatever it is. So the whole entire system...
So your point is you pick the diesel or whatever engine you know that works.
Which costs
Exactly.
billions.
We actually don't pick it. We really force our clients, the one who pays the check. We really work very hard to tell them it's best that we invest $40 million and do this than spend $10 million and do that. And that is a hard conversation to have. Very difficult. Because when they got $10 million, they tell them, we can't give you $40 million. So that's what I'm trying to say is like, we cannot innovate ourselves around a system that is corrupt. It's not possible. We must correct the system. Otherwise, this procurement and the laws and regulations and people's interest and egos and whatever it is and planning and procurement is just not working for what we need to achieve. Because we don't start from what is aimed at. If we were to go by what she's saying, let's start with having all hospitals in rural Africa powered by clean energy. Let's take that statement and then unpack it and have everybody who is involved in the production of that hospital agree to that and do what they must do so we can achieve that goal. But we make that goal there, and then you go to the Ministry of Health in Rwanda, they tell us, oh, we have $5 million, you need to figure out what to do with that. And then you cannot reconcile.
But the puzzling thing today is that 10 years ago, it was more expensive to go by the solar plant. Today, it is actually cheaper than the alternatives.
Correct.
So how come that despite that economic development, that still, I mean, here we hear about all these standalone, excellent examples, but we know that each day a number of decisions are being taken on all continents that goes in the wrong direction.
Correct.
How to change that?
I think it's to consolidate conversations. And consolidate, when I say consolidating conversations, what I mean is to have the right conversation with the right people, in the right place. Oftentimes, the right conversation takes place without the right people. Or they happen with the right people, but in the wrong place at the wrong time. It's not a lie, a lot of rural African hospitals are built with capital that comes from the West. Yeah. That's the simple truth.
That's true.
So, if that's the case, then where the conversation about capital that builds this infrastructure comes from cannot be decoupled with environmental conversations that are happening in Paris in COP. Where those conversations are happening, there have to be a voice from people that actually
The World Bank, the investment
exactly
community.
talking about the quality of healthcare that people in Africa deserve. Like, that's the right crowd that needs to make that decision. But it cannot be just the WHO and the World Bank discussing about how much money they're going to allocate for that.
But still, the WHO could have the muscles to go to some of these core institutions with the kind of messages you said, Maria. Also for COP28 to say, for instance, this idea, all new build hospitals from now on, we do it in the right manner.
Exactly. And then our Minister of Finance and Economics has to be there, because then when they start engaging the conversation with the World Bank, they're the ones who are going to say, well, we can't give you that.
So that's getting out of the silos that we discussed
earlier. So it's like
earlier.
their silos, not only their silos, but in the silos, the conversations are wrong.
No, I fully agree with you. That is why I mentioned this Attach, which is the platform where these type of dialogues we are trying to make sure are taking place. You're right regarding the devices that we use at the hospital sometimes. We need a harmonization to start with, to make sure that we don't have one supply donated by the Italian corporation who was passing by, then we have another electrical device donated by I don't know whom, no harmonization, then all running on diesel, which is an incredible bill. That this is the cost of running a hospital with the diesel generator is incredible, and it's ridiculous because that's not sustainable. And in fact, we still have a problem with the supply of energy, which is not sustainable either, because you have non-reliable sources of energy. You lose your vaccines because you lost the cold chain, you lost all your facilities. So we need a problem to solve, and I agree with you that this is about the World Bank. They are part now of our Attach, our platform. We hope that pharmaceutical companies need to be part of that, because the procurement started up front, I mean upstream, then the number of plastic and packaging on the supplies that you send to the hospitals, and of course the international cooperation.
But Maria, along with the development that digital will come more and more into the health service and medicine, and there are plenty of opportunities in that. Also the artificial intelligence and things like that. I guess that in order, for instance, for Africa and for vulnerable countries, least developed countries, to sort of follow that development, then you really need to get that energy infrastructure basically in place, or the gap will grow even wider.
Well, definitely, if you want digital medicine, you need to have electricity to plug your iPhone or to plug your iPad in order to have some assistance from other places. And everybody has an iPhone now, so we need to sort out this problem of access to clean sources of energy for the health sector, starting in Africa. I agree with you. This will require a holistic approach, harmonization of the medical devices to make sure that they will not suffer if there is this stabilization. We need to look at the problem of the diesel generators that are now very common. We need to look at the problem of the different donors. You have certain healthcare facilities in Africa with 3 solar panels in the roof. One for keeping the vaccine for an eradication program, one for the Global Fund, one for the polio eradication. That's not sensible either. No. You are laughing because you probably saw it as well. Yes. And I saw it, and it's so painful for me. So now we are working in WHO to upgrade that solar panel capacity, making sure that we harmonize, we create some standards, and we put this dialogue on a more holistic way. We will do our best. I don't know how much we will advance, but trust me, we will not miss any effort for solarizing Africa on a bigger scale, and a rational and hopefully good one.
But Christian, you as an architect also, here towards the end, so one thing is what COP28 and finance ministers and must all do, and I think we all agree here that it's a very combined effort that is needed. What would be, from what you have seen in your daily work, what would be your biggest wish to a group of architects like here? Where is it that the architects can do more? Because, you know, some of us, we have been working with these things for really many years, and we know that we can sit endlessly waiting for all things to be different and perfect. Yeah. But what could be done relatively speedy from the architecture sector's side?
From the architect sector, I think there are two things that have to happen. I think the first one is that we need to reimagine the practice of architecture. We need to, the same way that I was advocating for a global, honest conversation, I think in the practice of architecture we also need a come to Jesus type of moment, conversation. And that conversation should have the same outcome. What are the values of our practice? Why do we practice? For who and why? And then how? Because if we don't do that, then we will continue being comfortable in the current mode of practice, the current structure of practice, in which we sit in our well air-conditioned rooms and we wait for RFPs to come from WHO and my government. I respond to it and they give me a commission and they do a project. And we do that comfortably. We don't question how that mode of procuring and therefore offering architectural services is either ill-equipped to deliver what you're describing and not. That's the first thing. Now, on individual architects, not the fraternity or not the community of architects, we have to step out of our comfort zone. As an architect right now, I went to study in China. I spent 8 years studying in China. That's where I studied architecture. My relationship to architecture and means of production of elements of architecture is very different, because I know in China I can sketch anything I want on a piece of paper and send it out in a factory or 5 factories. By tomorrow morning at 8, I'll have 5 quotations and 5 different timelines where they can produce this in 5 different materials, and I can choose, because China has built that manufacturing capacity. When I work in Rwanda, that's a very, very different story. I can still do the same. I can still send my sketch to China to get those architectural elements produced and shipped over to Rwanda, but should I do that? Is that helpful? Should I lean and give in to the client's pressure to deliver this project next month and within this budget to do that? Is that excuse good enough for us to do that? So I feel like on individual architects, we need to step out of the practice we've been taught at school and practice what solves communities in the problem, in our communities, problems in our communities. I have cousins who are jobless. What good is my architecture if it's not creating jobs for them? I know them. It's not like it's the community, like, you know, that thing we talk about as if it's separate from me. They are my cousins. I know them. And I know they're able, they can do things, they can produce stuff. But why do I rely on a factory in China, in Turkey, in France, in whatever to produce what we have to consume? That's one problem we have. The other problem is the design part. So there's the production of things, so the means of production that construct the architecture is our responsibility as designers. We can never outsource the responsibilities to factories. When we do that, we've lost our leverage. Now, comes to design, we still have the power to understand the communities we are designing for their appropriate and right needs. Because somebody asked us to design a university campus does not mean that we're going to give them a university campus from England wherever. Or the university, like, I don't know, wherever. Like, we have to understand what a university means in that particular context. As one of the examples I gave earlier, like when we talked to Fred Swanik about Africa Leadership University, we really have to pay attention to what it is the problem they're trying to solve. And if we find they're trying to solve the wrong problem, I don't think we should engage in that project.
Very strong messages. Once again, there, thank you so much. Is there a final obstacle or demand to a group of architects that you would like to convey?
I will like to again invite all of you to think about health. And I think you all think about health when you go to the hospital, but think about health when you are planning, when you are designing, and get a little bit more involved on health discussions, because this is where now, if we go and implement the Paris Treaty, the Paris Treaty can be one of the most powerful public health treaties. If you look at what is required there, is all very well described. Rwanda, for those of us who worked in Rwanda years ago, when you go to Kigali, you see the transformation. So probably one of final message is the political willingness. Clearly, when you see what's happened to at least the Kigali, I don't know the rest of the country, but at least what's happening in Kigali, when I see now people with a motorcycle in Kigali wearing a helmet, where do you see that in other places in Africa? Excuse me. That's amazing. So miracles can happen if you have as well political willing. So go for it and implement the Paris Treaty, because this is the best.
And the last
health treaty
remark actually came from someone who has been living also in Kigali for 2 years, I understand. But thank you very much for these concluding remarks. I think that it's quite interesting. If we take many of the sessions that we have had today, some of the messaging, although it's different, it is in a similar vein. As we just heard Maria said, you have to widen the perspective. It's not just about economics and price. It's also about health. It's about these other kind of values. And we heard from Christian this, reimagine the practice also as architects and think more like practice for whom and with whom, and the labor force, local labor force and the local citizens must be part of that. I think that also echoes very well with what we heard during a previous session here. So thank you a lot, very interesting and very enlightening, and all the best with what you do respectively in the WHO and back home at the office in Kigali. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.